كلية الفقه الحنفي تقدم
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. In these few videos we're now going to look at the practical application of alcohol and ethanol. So we'll be looking at what alcohol means, what ethanol means, what are the different types of alcohol and ethanol, and what are the rulings in regards to ethanol. So when you have ethanol found in a product for external application or internal application, how do we look at that, and how do we deal with those scenarios? We will also have a look at the difference of opinion among scholars in regards to external products that are used for external application only, and those opinion of scholars who there's a bit more difference of opinion when it comes to consumption of ethanol. We'll be touching on the issue of bread, that when you're baking bread, as part of the process, ethanol is created. So when you consume bread, there are actually small amounts of ethanol within that bread. Similarly, when you have fruits, as they ripen, ethanol is created as well, and you start to have small quantities of ethanol within these ripened fruits. So the question is, are we allowed to then consume these fruits? How do we deal with the issue that they have ethanol inside them? Ethanol and alcohol inside them. We'll also be looking at the issue of yeast, because we're looking at food products as well. So yeast, because we're discussing bread and alcohol, we'll look at the issue of yeast, which is a bacteria, fungus, and whether you're allowed to use yeast or not. And what about brewer's yeast? Some yeast types originate from alcohol products, alcohol-based products. So what happens in that scenario? We're also going to touch on the issue of vanilla extract, because vanilla extract actually has a high quantity of alcohol in it. In fact, the entire process of making vanilla extract requires the use of alcohol to extract the flavors from the vanilla. And people can actually become intoxicated by drinking large amounts of vanilla extract. So what happens, is it permissible to use small amounts of alcohol or small amounts of vanilla extract within food products or not? And then we'll be looking at the issue of what happens if you just generally look at a product and at the back it says ethanol. It's a food product, but it says ethanol, it says alcohol. Can we utilize that product? We'll be looking at the case scenario of puff pastry and some other products as well, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. Okay, so now in this series of videos we're going to be looking at the contemporary application of the issue of alcohol, ethanol, and these types of terms that we come across, whether it comes to products that are used externally to the body or whether they are used in products which are going to be consumed. So a term that we come across today, so remember when it came to the traditional fiqh, we had khamr, we had muskir, we have these types of drinks that we mentioned. Now today we come across a concept called alcohol. We have an issue, or we have a concept or a product called alcohol. So the question is, what is alcohol? What is ethanol? And how does that tie in to our discussion of ashriba and kitab al-ashriba and these intoxicating drinks? And how do we kind of apply these issues in the modern context? So first of all, let's just understand this term alcohol. So alcohol is a generic term, and it includes within it various products. For example, ethanol, methanol, propanol, butanol, and so on, right? So alcohol is kind of like the class, if you want to put it that way, or the group, and then within it you have all of these products underneath alcohol, which is ethanol, methanol, and so on. Now, one type of these products is, I mentioned, ethanol. Ethanol is also known as, or referred to as, ethyl alcohol, or also grain alcohol. So you may see these kind of terms being used. Now, because it's kind of the most common form, or the most commonly adopted type of alcohol, sometimes you just use the word ethanol and alcohol kind of interchangeably. So sometimes it's just referred to as alcohol. So in reality, you have alcohol at the top, and a category of it is ethanol and so on. But because there's such a strong relation, because ethanol is so common, generally, or at times, what happens is people use the term alcohol and they're referring to ethanol specifically. So they may just say alcohol, even though technically they mean ethanol. Now, we've got a quote here of what exactly ethanol or ethyl alcohol is. And this quote is from the Encyclopedia Britannica. So ethyl alcohol, also called ethanol, grain alcohol or alcohol, the most important member of a class of organic compounds that are given the general name alcohols. Right? So that basically reiterates what I just mentioned there. So the relationship between alcohol and ethanol is what we refer to as umum khusus, right? Min wajh. So every ethanol will be an alcohol, because ethanol is a category of alcohol, but not every alcohol is going to be an ethanol. So every ethanol will be alcohol, but not every alcohol is going to be ethanol. So for example, butanol is an alcohol, but it's not ethanol. Now, when we see this product, ethanol specifically, what is the ruling of ethanol? Now, ethanol itself is intoxicating. It's muskir. It is intoxicating, and it is used commonly in alcohol beverages. It's used commonly in alcoholic beverages. So it's a main component that provides intoxication in alcoholic drinks. And again, and if you want a quote from Encyclopedia Britannica, ethyl alcohol, it is the intoxicating ingredient of many beverages produced by fermentation. So when you take a juice or a product through the process of fermentation, it's the ethanol within it which actually provides the intoxicating effect. It's the ethanol within it that provides the intoxicating effect. Now, if we take this idea that ethanol is the product that provides the intoxicating effect, and we take what we have learned from the traditional categories of drinks, we can combine the two and we can state that if the ethanol originates from dates or grapes, then it is not going to be allowed at all. So if the ethanol originates from dates or grapes, then it is not going to be allowed at all. Right? Why? Because that falls under the ashriba muharrama. Remember, the ashriba muharrama were dates and grapes and raisins and so on, right? So if it comes from dates or grapes, then it's not going to be allowed at all. If the ethanol does not originate from dates or grapes, if ethanol does not originate from dates or grapes, but it's, for example, it could be synthetic, or it originates from corn, sugar beet, sugar cane, or any other product, right, hops and so on, then if you remember our three categories of drinks, 1, 2 and 3, if it comes from any of these other products, then that means it falls under category number 3. So if the ethanol is originating from corn, then that means that this ethanol, this intoxicating drink, this ethanol itself, is actually category number 3. And we mentioned that in category number 3 there was a difference of opinion between Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad. Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Abu Yusuf permitted its consumption with certain conditions attached. Imam Muhammad said not allowed at all. Now this is where we start to see the application of ethanol within contemporary products that we have today, and the application of this fiqhi nuance here. So let's see the products that we have today: shampoo, shower gel, soaps, detergent, deodorant and the like. A lot of them contain ethanol, or they might just write alcohol, right? So the question is, this should be, based on Imam Muhammad's opinion, it should be najis for external application, and it should also be unlawful for consumption, for internal application, right, for consumption. But if we were to say that this is unlawful and it's impure and it's najis, then life would become considerably difficult, because you're going to have to go around and you're going to have to try and identify and source shower gels that don't have alcohol in them, shampoos that don't have alcohol in them, all food products that don't have any, incorporation of alcohol in them, or ethanol in them, it can become quite difficult and can become quite tricky, right? So the contemporary fuqaha, to kind of balance this, what they say is, look, we have an umumul balwa here. We have a public predicament. We have a widespread common issue which nearly everybody is affected by. And if we were to say and go by the opinion that ethanol in all circumstances is impure and najis, then that means it becomes very difficult for us to source the everyday products that we're going to be using on ourselves. So what do? So the contemporary fuqaha have kind of varied in the approach as to how they provide the scope here. I'm going to start with the most strictest, and then I'm going to show you the different opinions and kind of open up the leniency that is there. So the most strictest position and the most restrictive position is that, look, all of these products, shampoos and shower gels, the ethanol that they use or the alcohol they use is not going to come from grapes and dates, right? It's going to be too expensive for them to manufacture ethanol from grapes and dates to use in everyday products. The ethanol that is used in these products are generally created from other items. So that takes it out immediately from category number 1 and takes it to category number 3. Now, because these products are using ethanol not made from dates and grapes, what some contemporary fuqaha say is, they say that, look, we're going to give scope on Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf's position, but only for external application. We're only going to allow it for external application. So if there is ethanol or alcohol and you're using it as hand sanitization, you're using it as a cream or a lotion, you're using it as a shower gel, you're using it as a deodorant and a spray which you're going to put on, then look, this is category number 3 of alcohol, and Imam Abu Yusuf and Abu Hanifa, they didn't consider it to be najis, so we're not going to consider it to be najis. But what we will do is we'll still say that it's not permissible to consume. It's not going to be it's not going to be lawful to consume. And you wouldn't consume these products anyway. It'll be dangerous for your health to consume shower gels and shampoos and so on. So they open the door to the extent that they say that for external application it will be permissible. For external application it will be permissible. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So we're looking at the issue of ethanol here, and we mentioned that according to some contemporary scholars, if ethanol which does not originate from dates and grapes, if it was from dates and grapes, it'll still be najis and impure. And there are some products that will actually use grape alcohol, right? But the normal everyday product that you use, that you find in the supermarket generally, does not use alcohol that originates from dates or grapes. So if ethanol is found in a product, alcohol, ethanol is found in a product which is going to be used externally on the body, then some contemporary scholars say, look, there is scope to take the opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf, and we're going to allow the external application and consider it to be tahir and not najis. However, when it comes to consumption, we're going to totally close the door there, and we're going to say that alcohol or ethanol found in any food which is going to be produced and which is going to be kind of consumed, that is not going to be allowed, and that is not going to be permissible, and that is not going to be allowed, right? So that is one position in regards to ethanol and in regards to alcohol. Now, before we go into some of the other positions, what we'll do is we'll mention some of those other positions with, case scenarios, and we'll be looking at some fatwa on these issues as well, and I'll be reading through some of those fatwa, right? So we've looked at now one opinion in regards to ethanol. Now, what about the other types of alcohol? What do these scholars say there with the other alcohols? Well, you've got for example methanol. So what happened with the other products? Ethanol had an intoxicating element to it, so because of that, we were very easy to determine a ruling for it, and that intoxications are impermissible and unlawful. But where there's a need, we're going to create a bit of scope. Now, what about the other types of alcohol that come under the category of alcohol, like methanol and so on? So each one has to be looked at individually, that what does it do? So let's take methanol, for example. Now methanol, it doesn't intoxicate, but it is dangerous to your health if consumed, right? So what does that mean? That means because of the danger to health if consumed, we say it's not allowed to be consumed, but it can be used externally, right? So in summary, if any of the sub-alcohols, if they intoxicate, then they will have the same rule as ethanol. If they don't intoxicate, then we have to look at some of the other qualities. And if there's something, for example, which is dangerous to the health, then we'll say it is not allowed, right? Another concept that you come across is denatured alcohol. Denatured alcohol, which is what you find a lot in perfumes, is where they take ethanol and then they mix into it methanol, and it now becomes denatured alcohol. Now, why do they mix in methanol? Because then it becomes something that you cannot drink, right? It becomes dangerous to the health. Now, this denatured alcohol, it has ethanol and methanol. Ethanol is unlawful, right? But if for external application we say there's scope there, and methanol is not allowed to be consumed. So when you have a product that has denatured alcohol, you can't consume it due to health hazard, and you can't consume it because it has an intoxicating element because of the ethanol. But you can use it on external application. Why? Because ethanol can be used externally and methanol can also be used externally. So that's called denatured alcohol, right? That's denatured alcohol. So now, that's just some of the other, I want to just kind of just mention the other types of alcohols. Now let's go back to our ethanol discussion. So we said the most strictest view in regards to ethanol is that ethanol is allowed only for external application, and for consumption it is not allowed, right? Now there are going to be some circumstances where scholars then also open the door for consumption as well, in certain cases. Now where we will draw the line again, remember you can only use Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf's opinion where it's not being used for the purpose of getting drunk, for the purpose of intoxication, where it's being used just for the purpose of passing time. There has to be, remember, two criteria. One is the amount that is being used, so it should not be taken in an intoxicating amount, number one. And number two, what is the purpose behind the use of that product? Is it there for leisure, or is it there for a valid alternative purpose? Is there some reason behind it, not just leisure? Is there some medicinal benefit? Is there a health benefit? Is there strength? And so on. So when you use Abu Hanifa and Yusuf's opinion, remember there is a two-check process: the quantity being used and the purpose behind it. So group one of scholars, they say when it comes to ethanol that we only use external application, and everybody is fine with that. Now other scholars, they do allow consumption, right, of ethanol, provided that these conditions are met. That number one, you're not going to be consuming the product that you're consuming which has ethanol in it. It's not going to lead you towards intoxication. That's number one, of course. And number two, there's a reason why you're using it. There's a purpose behind it. There is a purpose behind it, right? So let's have a look at the case of let's have a look at bread. Right? Now, bread has ethanol inside it. As part of the process of making bread and baking bread, you're going to have ethanol as a product within that bread or cake and so on, right? In fact, fruits, generally like bananas, as they start to ripen, automatically ethanol is created. Now, how does that happen? The reason why that happens is bacteria which feeds on the sugars and breaks down the sugars, it creates two byproducts. One is ethanol and one is carbon dioxide. One is ethanol and one is carbon dioxide. So the ethanol is kind of the intoxicating element, right, but in very, very small quantities. And then the carbon dioxide is what is used to inflate the bread. That's what causes kind of the rise, right? So now when it comes to the issue of bread, there's two issues that are discussed. One is, first, the issue of yeast itself. So when you're making bread, you have yeast. Now, yeast is a single-celled microorganism, right, classified as a member of the fungus kingdom. So it's a type of fungus, right? So first, the issue of yeast is If yeast is not taken from a haram or impure source, then yeast is allowed, right, when making bread. And if it is from a haram or impure source, then it's not allowed. How do we know that this fungus and this bacteria is allowed for consumption? Because at the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the companions, all up until today, yeast was actually used to make bread and was consumed. And there was no nakir, there was no discouragement or prohibition from the Prophet ﷺ or any of the scholars as time came, as time as time passed on. So we don't have that issue with yeast. Yeast is permissible and yeast is allowed. Now you have the issue of the alcohol. You have the issue of the alcohol within the bread. So again, if you go back to the Encyclopedia of Food Science and Technology, it mentions that before dough can yield a light aerated loaf of bread, it must be fermented for a sufficiently long time to permit the yeast to act on the assimilable carbohydrates and convert them to alcohol and carbon dioxide. Alcohol and carbon dioxide. So we see that the baking of bread actually results in the creation of carbon dioxide and the creation of ethanol. Now, does that mean bread now becomes impermissible? You've got a food product which is going to be consumed orally and is going to have ethanol inside it. We've discussed the yeast. The yeast is allowed, and we know that from the time of the Prophet ﷺ. But what about this ethanol now? So some scholars said you can only use ethanol externally, right? Would they disallow this? No. The reason why they don't disallow this is for two reasons. Number one, again, the quantity is what you're going to look at. Is it going to intoxicate you? How much bread you consume, is it going to intoxicate you? If you have 50 loaves of bread right now and they all have small amounts of ethanol, are you going to become intoxicated? No. Number one. Number two, what is the purpose of the ethanol here? The ethanol here is not being consumed as a drink. In fact, the ethanol here is actually a byproduct of the process of making the bread or the ripening of the fruit. So it's a naturally occurring product within the bread in very, very small quantities. So therefore, the criteria of Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Abu Yusuf is actually being met in this scenario and circumstance also. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So we're having a look at bread, and we said that it naturally creates ethanol. So there are 2 points here. Number one is the quantity of ethanol is extremely low. In fact, based on some studies, there is less than 1%. Less than 1% of ethanol. Why? Because for 454 grams of bread, or for 454 grams of dough which is turned into bread, only 3 to 4 grams of ethanol are found. So imagine, for 454 grams, so if you say according to a study of the approximate 4 grams of ethanol produced by fermentation per pound of white bread, some 2 to 3 grams is retained in the freshly baked bread. So for every pound, which is about 454 grams, you have around 3 to 4 grams of ethanol. So it's extremely low in quantity. Extremely low in quantity. It is also not originating from dates or grapes. It's naturally occurring by the process of making bread, by the bacteria feeding on the carbohydrates, right, and breaking them down. So it's not from grapes or dates. The quantity is very less, and you're not drinking this for leisure or pastime. No, it's just a naturally occurring within the actual food product, within the bread itself. So now this ethanol, you see how, because it's category number 3, it's not coming from dates or grapes. Again, you can use the opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Abu Yusuf, and there is then again scope allowed to be able to consume the ethanol that is within this bread. So basically you're consuming the bread, but it has ethanol within it. Since we're just talking about bread, and we mentioned about yeast as well, there is another concept called brewer's yeast, right? So can you use brewer's yeast or not? Again, it just depends on where the yeast originates from. If the yeast actually comes from grapes or dates, then it's not going to be allowed. And if it's non-alcohol derived, then it will be allowed. So because remember, this module is about food in general, right? So we had the module, we had the videos on Ayman and Nudur, oaths and vows, and then this section is about food. So the bulk of it we're discussing is the issue of alcohol and ethanol and so on. But in addition to that, we are going to be having a look at some other issues related to food. They will kind of come in as we go along. So we've covered the issue now of finding ethanol naturally occurring within fruits. All the same things will apply that I mentioned here, that it's not from grapes or dates. Number two, the ethanol is not from, the quantity is very, very less. And number three, it's not kind of being consumed as ethanol itself. The fruit itself is being consumed. So bread and fruits, even though they may contain some ethanol inside them, that does not cause any problem or does not cause any sort of issue. Now, let's move on to something which is a bit more controversial, because with bread, nobody says bread is unlawful to eat. The next one that we're going to look at is vanilla extract. Vanilla extract. Now, vanilla extract is an interesting case scenario. The reason why is because this food product, the way that this vanilla extract is made is, and you can find a lot of videos on YouTube, for example, is generally they will take a form of alcohol, right? Vodka is used quite a lot. So you have a bottle or a jar filled with vodka, just vodka. Then vanilla beans are taken, those pods are taken, and they're placed, a few of them are placed in a bottle of vodka that is sealed shut, and that is left over 6 months, 1 year, 1.5 years, Allahu A'lam, can't remember how long exactly. And over that period of time, the kind of the flavor and the essence of the vanilla, it starts to extract into the alcohol. The alcohol works as an extract, and it pulls out all of the substances from within the vanilla. Then at the end of it, you have this kind of brown bottle of liquid, which is now, they take out the vanilla beans and you're left with what is referred to as vanilla extract. This is now vanilla extract. So you can see here that there's something which has a large amount of alcohol. Vanilla beans pods are put inside, and they are then, the alcohol extracts all of that kind of flavor and so on. And now you're left with this vanilla extract, and this is then sold on the shelves in very small bottles. Now, if you look at any vanilla extract, actual vanilla extract, what will happen? It will actually say it contains alcohol. It contains alcohol. Now, the quantity of alcohol here is quite high. 35% is actually the standard alcohol requirement for pure vanilla extract. So there needs to be at least 35% alcohol, right? And then you will also see there are some videos online which show individuals that just consume vanilla extract, and they test themselves using a breathalyzer, which the police would use to test your alcohol levels, right? And very quickly after taking a few of those shots, they reach the level of intoxication, or the rate of intoxication that would make it prohibited for a person to drive, just by consuming bottles of vanilla extract. Now, when a person is cooking, they don't obviously use vanilla extract, in large quantities like that. They only put in drops for the flavor. So the question is, what happens here? And do we allow this or do we not allow this? Because if somebody was to just consume vanilla extract, then yes, they will become drunk. But the usage of it is actually just very subtle, and it's just, a few drops in food. And no matter how much of that food you consume with those small drops of vanilla extract, it's not going to intoxicate you. It's not made from dates or grapes. It's made from other types of alcohols, right? So vodka and so on, right? So what do we do in this type of scenario? So here, when it comes to the likes of vanilla extract, there'll be a bit more of a difference of opinion. Some scholars will say, no, vanilla extract has a very high quantity of alcohol and ethanol, and therefore it should be avoided. And you should then find other types of vanilla, which are either synthetic, I think it's called vanillin, or you have other types of vanilla essence, not vanilla extract, and you again have to check the quantity of alcohol and so on in the process that is being used. So they say, no, you cannot use vanilla extract, the pure actual vanilla extract, right? Other scholars will say, and I have a fatwa here, it says, it will be halal to consume such food stuff that contain the extract on condition the alcohol in producing the vanilla extract is not made from grapes or dates. So because, just say you make trays and trays of cakes using drops of vanilla extract. If a person was to consume all of those cakes, they're never going to become drunk. So if you're going to use it in this manner, again, they're pulling on the opinion of Imam Hanifa and Abu Yusuf, and they're allowing it. But if a person was to start drinking the vanilla extract, if they were to start consuming the vanilla extract, what happens? Then that breaks the condition of Imam Hanifa and Yusuf, where it's now actually just being used in vain and for pastime and for the purpose of getting intoxicated, which of course is not allowed under anyone at all. So that would be the issue of vanilla extract. So that's kind of on the extreme side of things, because you could potentially get intoxicated by using vanilla extract. Another common ingredient that we see is puff pastry. Puff pastry. Now in the UK you have different companies that produce puff pastry. The most common company, kind of the most well-known brand, is called Just Roll. So Just Roll puff pastry. Now if you turn around the box on Just Roll puff pastry, it says in the ingredients that there is alcohol, right? Now if you buy puff pastry from other brands, so for example the Asda brand puff pastry, then it doesn't have alcohol in the ingredient. Now the question is, this is a pastry that's going to be used and it's going to be consumed. The ethanol quantity, alcohol quantity is going to be very less. It's going to be very, very small. No matter how much puff pastry you consume, you're not going to become drunk. So what happens in this scenario as well? So here, those scholars that say that, look, once alcohol is being put in as a consumable ingredient in a product that's going to be consumed, they disallow it and they say no. Other scholars say no. Again, look, the ethanol alcohol is serving another purpose. It might be for the purpose of shelf life, increasing shelf life, to preserve the item. It might be used to help extract some flavors. It might be used for some other reasons. You're not consuming here the ethanol. So therefore, they would say that even though the puff pastry has alcohol as an ingredient in there, it is still permissible to consume puff pastry, even if it's a Just Roll puff pastry that has the alcohol in there, because number one, you're not drinking it to get intoxicated. You won't get intoxicated. It doesn't come from dates and grapes, and you're not using it for the purpose of drinking. You're actually just using it. It's an ingredient within the product already, as for other reasons and for other purposes. So hopefully now you kind of get an idea of how some scholars are going to deal with this issue of ethanol alcohol in products. If it's external, pretty much everybody agrees that it's fine. If it's going to be consumable, then in that case, there's a bit of difference of opinion among scholars. You see where the leniency is, and you see where the more stricter opinions kind of stand. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Alhamdulillah, we've had a look at the issue of alcohol and ethanol. So we said alcohol is kind of the main category, and underneath it you have ethanol, methanol, propanol, and the likes. Ethanol is something which intoxicates you, and the scholars have said that ethanol, which originates not from date or grape source, if it's going to be used in a product for external application, then that is permissible and that is allowed on the body. We won't consider it najis, based on the opinion of Shaykhain, Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf, rahimahumullah ta'ala. As for if it's going to be used in a food product and it's going to be something which is going to be consumed, then there is a bit of a range of opinion. If it's in something which is naturally occurring, like in fruits or in bread and so on, then we say the quantity is very low, and we say that there is scope to use the opinion of Shaykhain, and we allow it there. As for in scenarios where it is found in ingredients of products like puff pastry, some scholars will say best to just go for the alternative. Others say no, there's scope to use it as well, because it's not really going to intoxicate you, and the quantity again is also very low. There's a bit more of an ikhtilaf and a difference of opinion when it comes to the likes of vanilla extract, because that has a high quantity of alcohol. In the previous scenarios of bread and fruits and so on, there's very, very small, minute quantities, whereas in vanilla extract there's a high level and a high quantity of alcohol that remains in the final product. So even there, some scholars have a level of leniency, and they say if you're using it properly and just in its drops, then it's going to be permissible to use. Of course, if you consume it, that's going to be unlawful. Others say no, you shouldn't be using vanilla extract. You should actually go for the alternatives which don't have alcohol in them, whether that's the synthetic. It may not have that same level of quality, it might not give you that same flavor that you want, but it's going to be the more cautious opinion and the more cautious approach. So hopefully that clarifies the application side of the traditional fiqh on Kitab al-Ashriba and how we apply the issue to alcohols and products that contain alcohol and ethanol in them today. Inshallah, we'll be touching on a few other issues in the next few videos, inshallah ta'ala.